Hello, welcome to the Fair Deal Democrats podcast. I'm your host, Josh Kilroy, and I am excited this week to be joined by Regan Burke. A little story when I first entered politics back in 1994, I went to work for a friend of mine who was running for Congress on the east side of Chicago, a guy named Clem Balanoff, who was at the time state representative as his mother had been before him. And over the course of learning the ropes, the one name that kept coming up, said with reverence a number of times, was Regan Burke. Like my first day on the job, Bob Balanoff, who was the campaign manager and later a judge, he said, "Oh, you don't know Regan Burke by any chance?" And I did not at that time. But it was spoken with hushed tones in ways that few other people were spoken about. And he even said at one point we were having a logistical issue. And he said flat out, "What would Regan Burke do in this situation?" And that really captures the respect that my guest today has. At the time, she couldn't help on the campaign because she was working for the Clinton administration. And we'll get all into that. But first, welcome, Regan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Josh. It's lovely to see you today. Thank you.
Yes. So let me just read a little bit more about your bio. So you have a long history of service in federal and local governments, as well as political campaigns. Your roles include operations manager for the Cook County Clerk, David Orr, a name we will come back to, I'm sure. Assistant to the U.S. Secretary of Education again, under the Clinton administration, Richard Riley, correct?
Right? That's right. Richard
All right.
Riley, South
And the
Carolina.
director of, yes, right, one of our best education secretaries, director of scheduling and advance for the Bill Clinton for President campaign, and former executive director of the Illinois Democratic Party. In semi-retirement, she's on several boards, including Skyline Village Chicago, the Sounds Good Choirs, and board chair of RAIN. Uh, Also very interesting. Active in your church, and more, I guess, prominently, you're a writer. You recently published your memoir a few years ago during the pandemic. I remember attending the release party on Zoom, and unfortunately, I'm kicking myself. Your book is on a bookshelf in another space that I have in the old Balanoff house on Ewing Avenue, and it's not here with me today. I meant to display it. Um, so, Regan, as I mentioned earlier before the show, I wanted to reach out to you because you've been involved in protests and many other things for since the 1960s. You had just sent out an email. Your latest writing was on the No Kings protest. It was really quite. It was a nice bit of writing. I don't want to read too much of it here, but I wanted to get your sense of the No Kings protest. Your experience of it. Do you think it was effective?
Well, the No Kings protests on October 18th in Chicago, and we can see from the reporting that this is true all over the country. So, right now, when I go to protests, I have to be careful because I'm a little wobbly. And so, which is fine, but so I go to them and I can't really stand still in one spot too long. I was at the rally in Met Park on Butler Field and with friends from church, really, who had big signs that said faith, not fear, which was important, but sort of anomaly in a rally in a way. And some other friends who joined us who were from the neighborhood I live in. And as I walked around the field to get a sense of, well, I was kind of looking for the signs. Sometimes they're really funny, but really to get a sense of who was there. And, there were so many people that are new there after the fact that I did not see in that crowd, which is odd. And also, when they would say where they were sort of standing right where I was at any given moment. But the really big sense that I got were you could see it in the signs because No, there was no very little profanity, very little, real negative stuff on Trump and the Trump administration, ICE, except, things like Chicago melts ice with big pictures of ice cubes. But they were the kinds of things that were you might think of as negative or slams against any authoritarian person or people were very benign, and it really struck me because I am not sure I've ever been in a protest like that. I mean, ever. And because protesters by nature are mad. We're mad. That's why we're out there. We're really mad about what's happening. And also, then they went from Butler Field, the whole thing, this march through the loop, and the same thing in the loop. Along the way, there were people, they're like sort of little groups of people dancing and singing, and almost as if they were set there to entertain us as we went. And there was no rowdiness, nobody pushing anybody out of the way. Of course, in Chicago, in the last probably, I would say, maybe 25 years. So I've been in every protest in Chicago that I can be. And the police in Chicago have really learned how to handle the protesters, which is pretty much let them go where they want to go. So in these protests, in Trump's first administration and this one, everybody wants to go past Trump Tower. And, at first, the first administration, they wouldn't let us near the Trump Tower, and they realized they have to. So we had to be on the bridge or close to the bridge and across the river from Trump Tower because everybody wants to scream at Trump, and it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny when you're coming up north on Michigan Avenue. As soon as you round that corner, see the Trump sign, everybody starts screaming at him. But other than that, and even that was pretty funny, tell you the truth. It was very peaceful, and I'm not so sure that I was surprised or shocked by it, but it was very, very different than anything I'd seen before, and very different than what I'd seen even in the spring, before the ice raids started. So, also, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, 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 please. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I was going to say that a couple of weeks ago, I've been out to the Broadview Ice Detention Center a few times, twice. And the first time I went out there with a group called Christians for something or other. They were Christians, a group of Christians going out there to have a communion service. Christians against deportation. That's who they are. So out at Broadview for years, there have been a group of nuns that were headed by two nuns who are 90 years old now, where they every Friday morning, the detention the people that were inside Broadview, because it was temporary, overnight, really, they would come out on buses every Friday morning and then go to wherever it was they were going. And even then, for years, nobody's ever known where they've gone. We don't know where they went to the airport. We don't know if they went to some other country. Nobody ever really knew. So these are deportees. And when in this latest Trump administration, they do that every day. But on Friday morning, so the nuns would gather and they would say the Catholic rosary, as loud as they could, in hopes that the people on the buses could hear them, just to know that people cared about them and were praying for them. And so I knew about that. Friday morning, the Christians against deportation went out there to have a communion service, and there were a couple hundred people there. And so people that I went with, they brought a gas mask for me, right? And I said, well, I can't carry that, right? And I can't hold it. I can't carry it. I said, I really looked at this one person and I said, nothing's going to happen to me. Nothing's ever happened to me. Nothing's going to happen to me. I really know how to get out of harm's way. And especially now that I'm older, right? There's just, you have a sense of where you can stand and where you should be, right? And,
Right.
I just want to and swell the number. I'm not yelling at anybody, right? I want to swell the numbers all the time, just be in that number, which is the name of my book.
Right.
So, and I think that's important for anybody, the we're not out there ever to protest, to scream at people, I never have been, and I've never been hurt or arrested at a protest. So, but people who hadn't been there, it was kind of funny, with the, but Broadview in the past few weeks, and the past few weeks just before that, you know, really bad things are happening there. The ICE
Right.
agents, if they are ICE agents, because we don't really know, were shooting people with pepper balls and mace, and throwing people into vans who were just protesting. At any rate, that didn't happen that day. And then I know you're interested in the meditation out there, so a couple of weeks ago, I went with a friend. It was still warm in Chicago in mid October. It was great, just about 10 days ago. So, I have like 4 or 5 signal channels that I'm on, and one of them popped up. There was a silent meditation, and this friend of mine and I we're meditators, right? I wouldn't say we're Buddhists, but we're meditators. And we went out there with our lawn chairs and pulled up and uh, sat facing west, which other people, there was a handful of people there sitting facing west, and we sat down and meditated for about 45 minutes silently, and it was silent, and it was stunning. I have been involved in several public sits in Chicago, and I always find them really meaningful, more meaningful than um, other place groups where I've gathered
Right.
to sit with people and meditate, because it's a public witness of peace, and that's what this was. And when we finished meditating, my friend and I turned around and saw about 200 people behind us. So it was just stunning, because we never even heard them come in.
Right.
Meditators, they're quiet. They just will slip in the door and sit down and be quiet. Everybody knows to be quiet. And as you know, the governor has sent state troopers out to Broadview to really protect the protesters. And so not all of the state troopers got that message initially, like the day I was there for the communion service. Some of them were pretty harsh, like, a couple of them were yelling, if you try anything, we're going to arrest you, which is
Right.
fighting
Right.
words, I'd say. But nobody got arrested. There were a few tussles, but anyway, that day as we were leaving, this one state trooper looked me right in the eye and said, "Thank you for coming." It was really a stunning thing, So I have a sense, because of that and because of what happened with the No Kings protest, that there are people in this country that are positioned and ready for peace, to be at peace, to display peace, to be peaceful, to act peacefully. And
Right.
in an authoritarian government, which I think, Josh, you've probably learned this in the past couple of months. Certainly I have, when stuff that we've been reading, this is what works. So we're not the only ones getting that message, right?
Right. When you are meditating in that public space, are you trying to draft off the energy that is out there, or are you trying to push positive energy out to the
That's a
crowd?
good question. I try to push positive energy out. What surprises me is how much energy comes, right? It's because it's not a two-way street. It's a little more nuanced than that. It's more like, the vibes around you. But that's what I do. Focus on that, just peace and pushing peace out and pushing peace out. So the real this real spirit inside me is moved by the people around me, which I kind of don't realize until it's over. You probably experience. So people, who meditate public spaces say this. So it's pretty powerful. And I hope there's more. So now the same group, who I don't know who they are, by the way, because true Buddhists, we don't know their names. I think it might be part of Chicago Meditates, but I'm not sure. Anyway, they're out there every Sunday at 3 o'clock. They announce, yeah, in the afternoon. Yeah, every
Right.
Sunday at 3 o'clock. So most out at Broadview, protesters are there in the morning and the late afternoon during the week. Yeah, so Sunday at 3 o'clock is a safe time, and a time that there's space there, to sit and meditate.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
So
Is
you
there
need to go out there, Josh.
I do. I'm very intrigued. I'm going to look this up. If I find a link, I'll put it in the notes along with the show.
Yeah.
All right. So I read your memoir when it came out. Like I said, I don't have it with me, which is kicking myself. But tell us a little bit about how you came to Chicago, because I know your childhood was a bit troubled,
Yeah.
and tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I was raised in with two alcoholic parents, in a family of four children, and we moved around all over the Midwest. That's what alcoholic families do. And when I became a teenager and started drinking, I immediately was a full blown alcoholic, no question. And it took me 5 years to get through high school. And part of that time I lived with my mother, part of that time I lived with my father. And I finally made it through high school and went to college for a year, and, was drunk all the time. And then, it was just the beginning of, at least for my age, really, it was really the beginning of full blown psychedelic drugs, including pot. And so I was a hippie, but very vocal, because I started being very vocal about politics when I was around the eighth grade, because I had a friend whose father was in the John Birch Society, and he had the John Birch book. And I had to read it to refute what he was saying, because I knew what he was saying was so hateful. So I started to argue against all of that then. But anyway, so I was very vocal as an active alcoholic. And then I started to go to meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And it took me a while to really get sober there. But when I did, I was living in New Jersey at the time, because that's where my mother had moved us when she left my father. And then when I got sober, I came back to Chicago. I came back to Chicago because that's where my father was. I didn't live with him, but anyway, I got an apartment in Chicago, and I had a young son with me then. And so we then lived in Chicago. And I had a friend here I had met on some drunken trip to Vermont, skiing, kind of skiing. And he was a lawyer here, and he was working on Helen Schiller's campaign. And so he said to me, "You have to come up here and work on," I was living like in Sandburg Village. "You have to come up here," which is, really in the city, middle America, right? The middle America of Chicago. So I went to Uptown, which is a neighborhood I have never been in before in my life. And except that I should say, when in the 1968 election, my candidate was Eugene McCarthy. And then I was living in New Jersey, and I used to go to the inner city of Trenton to canvass for Eugene McCarthy. So it's not as though I hadn't been familiar with neighborhoods like Uptown, which is probably gentrified now. But
Oh, yes, yes.
yeah, but at any rate, it wasn't that was pretty much fun to work. That was pretty, well, a lot of fun, like campaigns are, because you meet people like me, right? I mean, there's a reason Helen Schiller was very progressive, liberal, very liberal. We didn't progressives then. She was running for the city council, and if she won, which she did, then the city council, she would have been sort of the first person on the north side to be, this rebel rouser in the city council, and she was. So that was
Was that
those kinds of campaigns where you meet people like you and me, are
right?
fun, right? 70, probably 70.
Yeah. Right. Right. So yes, because now we think of the North Side as such a progressive area, but Helen was really the first, and
Yeah.
David Orr as well, up
And
in
David
the
Orr, yeah. Yeah.
right.
Right.
So yeah, so you would have tangled with that would have maybe been your first encounter directly with the Chicago machine. Is that fair to
Oh my
say?
gosh, yes. And of course, it was great to have an enemy.
Right.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was involved with the IVI IPO. And I mean, we used to go to, it's very hard to go to City Hall, City Council meetings in Chicago City Hall now. It's not hard, but there's a process to get in there to be an observer. There wasn't then. So we used to go down there all the time with signs and sit in the gallery and yell at people and stuff like that. I didn't really yell at people. I always had a kind of hard time doing that because I thought even going
Right.
a body like the city council, I still have respect for that. I have respect for the body. I have respect for the aldermen, even though some of them are not very bright or weren't. I
Right.
still there's some kind of, for me as a citizen, respect for the body. So, but at any rate, I could carry a sign. So, and in those times too, David Orr in the city council then was trying to get a rent control bill passed, which of course we were all for that, even though we were young white people from the north side.
Right. Right. So yes, Uptown was interesting at that time because it was a mix of sort of whites from Appalachia plus
Yes,
African American. It was a very
yeah,
eclectic community, but very, very poor. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I lived there in the 90s and it had just begun to gentrify. But, you could really see Helen Schiller had a lot of work to do. That's for sure. How did you, so you're working for these rabble rousers, rebels. What was the trend? When did you go to work for the Illinois Democratic Party?
Um, Trying to think of how that really happened, but I had also so I had gone to work in '84 for Gary Hart, and I got into all the political campaigns I was in because of volunteering. So when Gary Hart won New Hampshire in '84, all of a sudden there was an explosion in Chicago because it's not like we were next, but we were a month away. So I volunteered in some office they had and then helped them open an office, get phones, all of that stuff. Took a leave of absence from the job that I had. And for 3 weeks, that was it. It was Gary Hart. And then I quit my job and went on the road to Indiana. I went to Indiana and Ohio, Indiana for Gary Hart as an unpaid person. So anyway,
Mhm.
I met a lot of friends there who really, I mean, Gary Hart, now when people have always written about him as a moderate, right? But I never thought of him that way.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't think of him that way who were actually out there on the road for him and doing stuff for him for free because he was so different. His thinking was so different and he didn't sound or think like a politician. So
Right.
we really like that. And also, he uh, it's similar to Eugene McCarthy. He was ready to transform the government,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Probably in a little more systematic way than what's happening now. And then I just got to know people and I ended up actually in Washington D.C. then working for Gary Hart. And when I came back, he lost obviously to Chicago. I got a regular job and then I volunteered. Well, I worked for Mondale for a while there after that. But anyway, so it just sort of went on like that. And then I would volunteer for more campaigns and more campaigns. And then I ended up working for, um, so I worked in Adlai Stevenson for governor campaigns, both Adlai Stevenson for governor campaigns. And the second Adlai Stevenson for governor campaign was run by the Madigan Group, all of Madigan. Madigan sent his chief of staff to be the campaign manager. He had lots of people from his staff work in the campaign, so I knew all of them. And then I was, away somewhere. I can't remember where. I was in the, I think, yeah, I was in the Bahamas, like vacationing, and I got a telephone call from Madigan's chief of staff who said to me, "You got to come. I'm in the Bahamas, right? You got to come
Right.
back here and run this campaign in the 10th ward." So, I mean, I knew Chicago pretty well, and I knew that the 10th ward was like a far cry from sitting on the beach in the Bahamas, right? So I did, and I was a little starstruck walking into the 10th ward, and of course that was the Balanoffs. And
Right.
then when Clem Balanoff won for state rep, I was on Madigan's staff, and went to Springfield and stuff like that. And then I got to know pretty well his chief of staff then was Gary Lapel, and Gary Lapel ended up running the state party and asked me to be the director of the state party. So I was for a few years there in the turn of the right in 89, 90.
Right. So I do want to just circle back because the second Adlai Stevenson campaign was noted for a very memorable mishap, which is that the lieutenant governor was a LaRouche. The woman who won the prime was a
Right,
LaRouche. Was that correct?
right. That's right. So the lieutenant governor and the secretary of the state
State. Right.
won the primary.
Right.
So they were extremists, and
Yes.
Adlai could not run. Then
No.
he would have to run with that lieutenant governor who won. So he couldn't do that,
No.
and nor have a ticket on his ticket, the Secretary of State. So we had to form a new party, which was called the Solidarity Party, which meant, like in the middle of August or in August, we had to form this whole new party, right? Get people to know what it was, right? Work on this campaign, right? Like
Right.
we were going to win always, right? We were like, it was a campaign of hysterics, right? We were like hysterical all the time. So, because, you had to, it's not like you had to pretend that we were going to win. It's that you had to, like, bring it up to others, right? Don't worry, we're going to win. This will work,
Right.
when
Right. Well, the
nobody knew
'82
that they were going to win.
campaign had been so close, and there was real hopes that Adlai Stevenson could beat Thompson.
Right.
At that point, was in the middle of a long string of victories,
That's right.
and that whole incident with the LaRouches really, it seemed like the campaign never fully recovered from that.
Right. No, there was no time to recover, right?
Right.
Because by the time we figured out we had to have a new party, you had to go
Right.
through all the machinations of forming a new party, letting people
Right.
know what the name. People had to decide what the name was. There was
Right.
things, deliberations that happened that probably took too long. But the real thing was that we didn't know it. You know, how did we miss that? How did we miss that guy was going to win? Those two people, the LaRouche party was going to win. And, there was polling in those days. It's not as though
Right.
we couldn't have known, but nobody ever tested it. Not the Democratic Party, not our campaign, nobody. Um, so it was hard, very hard. And the first campaign, you're right, was when we went through a discovery recount then with the Adlai Stevenson campaign in '82 with Governor Thompson. So those were hard campaigns, but boy, I've certainly learned a lot, right?
Right. Well, it seemed like the '86 campaign was undermined because they did the traditional slating. They made sure every ethnic group was represented. And
That's
I think
right.
earlier Paczynski was the
Yeah,
candidate for lieutenant governor.
that's
And
right.
people looked at her opponent was like Janet Johnson or something like
Right.
that. And people walked in like, I can't pronounce this person's, I'm voting for Janet, whatever.
That's right.
And completely caught people by off
Right.
guard. So, what was it like? I mean, sadly, Mike Madigan is in his second week of federal incarceration.
Yeah.
He was still just at the early end of his speakership at that time,
Hmm.
which went on for nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
And but can you just tell? I mean, you were on the inside. Can
Yeah.
you? What was it
I'm
like being
telling
on?
you, there was nobody as organized as Mike Madigan. Like the first thing you learned working for him is you have to know the rules. Like we're in the legislature, right? And Clem Balanoff, who had been my candidate, won. Okay, what are the rules? Well, fortunately, Clem Balanoff is really smart, so he got to know the rules right away. He knows that game anyway because he's a good organizer. But
Right,
working for Madigan is you got to know what are the rules. What are the rules, right? So that's how you're going to move legislation forward. That's how you're going to make a name for yourself. That both in Springfield and in the candidates' districts, what are the rules there? All of the rules, right? And not just the legal rules, right? But what's the politics there, right? What is the issue there, right? Those kinds of rules, all of those things. And he was really good at that. And, frankly, for me, whatever it was, I know what Mike Madigan did. I know what he was and what he did and what he was accused of and why he's in jail. I'm one of those people. I think you're like this too, who I just don't believe in jailing nonviolent offenders. I believe that jail is not to punish, but it is to keep violent people away from the public. So I don't think he should be there. It's one thing to be convicted of what he did, but it's another thing to go to jail.
right,
But that's something that we've given up the fight on that in the United States,
right,
it seems. But at any
right,
rate, it was always obvious from the get go with Mike Madigan that there were some groups that you were going to work with, some lobbyists and some you weren't. It's simple as that, right? And also, if you were on the Madigan staff, you had lobbyists coming at you, right? And so you had to know that rule. And not the legal rule, like what we
right,
can do, the Madigan rule of keeping your mouth shut.
right,
You do not talk. You
right,
don't go out to bars at night, get drunk with your fellows, and with the possibility of lobbyists being around. If you did and something happened, he would find out about it. You'd be gone. There was no question about it. All of that, all the politics, everything around it, how to be in that world, right? You learned pretty fast, and if you didn't, you would be gone. So, and it
correct.
was fun, exciting. I was surprised at how much fun. Of course, working with Clem Balanoff was fun, but the legislation itself was because the legislation, if you go in with try not to be an idealist, but with a sort of an agenda, like this is the bill we need, right? And you're uncompromising in it, nothing's going to happen. So
Right,
we know these things now, and but learning them was really good. It was really good because even now, I mean, I'm definitely a Democrat. I'm not saying I want to compromise with the Republicans, but
right,
in the argument with the shutdown, I'm thinking, where's the compromise? Oh, you're
right.
probably doing that too.
Yes,
Something's got to happen here, that kind of thing. I'm not the person like a lot of my friends are. The Democrats got to stick to it. They got to fight harder. They got
right,
to not give in. No, I'm not that person. And I learned that working for Mike Madigan in Springfield.
right. If everyone is an ideological zealot, like you don't have the pragmatists, and nothing ever gets done.
Right.
I do want to ask because I think one of the big it's a misconception I had for many years because Madigan became so powerful and was sort of such a protean figure in Illinois politics. And, because he punished his enemies, people have always thought, he's the stern Darth Vader like guy. But, the legislators I talked with, and, Robin Gable is one of the candidates I helped elect, now the House Majority Leader. That's not the picture they have. He was very accommodating. That's why people voted for him to be the speaker.
Be the
He's like,
speaker. Yeah.
how can I help you pass your bill? What do you really care about?
Yeah.
Can you just, yeah, tell a little bit
No,
about that?
well, that's true. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't characterize him either as a Darth Vader kind of guy,
Right,
but you're right. He would help people pass their bills, and the women worked in Springfield then, and like Robin was a lobbyist then. You know, she's a good legislator now. The but the it's not an easier time, I would say, because of what's happening on the federal government side, but and no money, and she's chief budgeteer, right? So, but then he, pretty much, what do you want in the budget, kind of thing, right?
right,
And things you could put in the budget that you needed for your district, right, to win, right? He expected you to know that and to win in your district, and he would try to get those through. They may be things that he didn't agree with. They may be, but lots of women's issues that I can't really articulate because I can't remember what the particulars are, but there were a lot of women's issues that went through that legislature that people were surprised that he would support because he's an Irish Catholic,
right,
and he didn't really believe in abortion, but he didn't he didn't push the bills away when they came at him. He didn't. And
right,
I would say, in a lot of ways, it you could not cross him. You couldn't, but you didn't have to. You just didn't have to. You could present your case to him and see what would happen. If you crossed him after that, then you're kind of done with him. He's not,
right,
you know, he was a good guy in that way, right? But
right,
that's how he got so much strength. He played hardball,
right,
and also with the redistricting. I mean, he was going to save your district no matter what, even if you didn't want to run again. Don't worry,
right.
I'm saving your district. So, you may have read this thing that I wrote a couple of months ago, maybe, about redistricting. Is that we had a computer in the basement of the
Right,
Capitol building. I
right,
think that's where it was, but I remember going down there a lot, and you know, figure, there were times when we as staff could go down there and help figure out where are the people we were working for, how they could keep their districts if they were on a district that was borderline Republican. So I remember watching that, and it was before, it was in the 80s, so it wasn't now like now. So that would be second nature to you. Everybody says this state is heavily gerrymandered, but Mike Madigan made this state blue. There's no doubt about it.
no doubt about it. Yes, right. Now it's interesting because you were again right at the start of this. I came into politics in Illinois as I, throughout my career moved to other states and saw other state Democratic parties. It was puzzling to me that the state Democratic Party, like in California, is not just obsessed with winning one branch of the assembly as their only goal. But the Illinois Democratic Party had one goal, it seemed,
Yeah,
and it was keeping the House.
yeah,
And,
definitely, because then Madigan would be the speaker.
right.
Because all those state reps would vote for him because he was loyal to them and keeping their
Yes,
districts. Yeah, there
right.
was always, you're exactly right, one goal, keep the House. And that. That means a lot of people know that because that's been written about.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that was it.
right, right. Well, and, I mean, just to spell it out for people who, listeners who might not, the speakership was his power to make a ton of money
Yep,
as a property tax attorney, which was
yeah,
really what a lot of this was about, which is why
yeah,
he's currently a guest of the
yeah,
government.
yeah.
And it's very unfortunate. But okay, so I want to next talk about Bill Clinton. I'm sorry, this
Okay,
conversation has been so engrossing, it's going a little longer than I'd like, so I will try to keep it quick.
okay,
But
okay.
you were early to Bill Clinton, you know,
Yeah,
in that '92 cycle. What,
yeah.
attracted you to him above the other candidates?
Yeah, so something embarrassingly attracted me to him, and that was he had this message at the beginning about personal responsibility. So I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous and AA, right? And personal responsibility, we don't, it's not an expression that we use, but it is what we are, right? I take responsibility for myself. That's what we are. So that expression that he was using early on in his campaign, I really was attracted to that. And the way he talked about it, and, um, you know, it, after a while, he went to Al Anon meetings all the time because his brother was a drug addict, because his stepfather, was an alcoholic. So he had been very familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was like almost the basis of what he was talking about. I didn't know that then. So I had
Right,
this sort of leveling in his world, really. But then I met him. Right. I was in a room, like a big conference room at one of the clubs, one of the men's clubs that had just turned women, and with maybe 3 women and 20 men, around a table. Um, a little reception for him. And I was there because I was the director of the state party. So, and the speaker of the house wasn't there. Gary Lapel wasn't there because they weren't interested in
right,
him, because he was
right,
a nobody. This guy coming
right.
up from Arkansas to meet politicians. Well, there were some politicians that knew him and really liked him. So he comes in this room and walks around, and then he gets to me and he said, "Hello, Regan," right? Like that. So he knew me. He knew my name right then, and he was like that with people going around the room as much as possible. But since I was one of the few women he wouldn't know me get, but he knew I was the head of the part, running the party too. So he knew that the I mean the charm of him and the politician in him was so magnetic, just
Right.
magnetic, and we know that now, of course, everybody knew that. Everybody got to know that right away, which is, which is why I won and
Right,
continue to win even through all the problems he had, right?
right. If he could have run in 2000, he still would have won
I think he would have
after
won.
all
Yeah.
of that. And Al
Yeah.
Gore couldn't figure that out.
Yeah.
But he must have been this. I mean, his charisma. Have you met a more charismatic person than Bill Clinton?
No, no, I have
Right.
not. I really have
And
not.
plus, people who've met him and worked with him, I mean, almost the smartest person most people have met as well. I mean,
He and Hillary as well. I mean,
right,
they are two of the smartest people that, anybody could know. Anybody could know. And so I went then, I called somebody up and said, "I'm going to Arkansas now, to Little Rock, to vote for Bill Clinton." This person thought I was like absolutely mad. Not Clem
right,
Balanoff. Wait, I'm lightening myself up here. It's getting, I don't know. It just happened. So you know, I can't remember what Clem said. Clem Balanoff, who was my friend. I'm going to Arkansas. I'm going to Little Rock, right? We're people in Chicago, unless they're from Arkansas. We know many people from Arkansas, but they've never heard of Little Rock. So I go down there and worked through the primary as a scheduler and came back here, worked for David Orr for a while, and then I went to Washington when he won and worked in the Department of Education. But what the Clinton people did was there were a lot of advanced people that in the Bush White House that were in the White House. They were part of the staff. They were on the budget. When you do advance, you don't need an office, right? Because you're just on the road mostly all the time. So
right,
what the Clinton people did was they put all those people into agencies and departments so that they could just call on them anytime to come out and do advance. And that's why I was in the Department of Education. So I had a team of people, 4 or 5 people at any given time, that we worked on Secretary Riley's schedule in advance for him. And at the same time, there was always somebody out working on the road for the White House, 1 or 2 people. So I got to do a lot of that. And I was with Hillary several times, especially if Hillary did an education event, which she did a lot of. Um, I mean, she would just go up to the podium and she never looked at her notes. And she would deliver these speeches to these educators all about anything from early education to particularly um, um, what were we doing? Public-private partnerships, in high schools and public. She knew so much about that. She was really into that. And her favorite place to go was community colleges because students were there too. It wasn't just talking to educators. So yeah, she loved that. And she really loved talking to students. So she was so smart. She is so smart, really.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So just to go back to the 92 campaign a bit, because it was a campaign that was repeatedly rocked by scandals. What
Yeah.
was it to be on the inside of that?
It was really hard. It was very hard because I was the director of scheduling in advance. So what I did was I sent people out to places where they set up events, and I would get a phone call from somebody saying, "Oh, there's a woman waiting in the lobby for Clinton to come back from his event, and she says she's known him for years, right?" And I'd say, "Get rid of her," right? And that didn't happen. That didn't happen, and he'd invite her up to play cards with him and the boys, and I'm not saying that things like that happened all the time. It probably happened more than I knew about. I knew about a lot of them, and it really made me angry and sad. And when I left, I had to tell the campaign manager, this he's just going to blow everything, right? And this was after Jennifer Flowers. He's going to blow
Right.
everything. He's not stopped. He's going to keep going.
Right.
These women are appearing everywhere. Whenever he's in a room, the advanced people have to get the prettiest women out of the room because he keeps staring at them
Hmm.
like that. Now he's admitted to all of this, so I don't
Right.
mind. There was that documentary about Hillary where one whole section of it was him admitting to all of this. Um, but he didn't at the time, so it was
Right.
very difficult. And the other thing that was difficult about it was the messaging, because the campaign different messaging for different parts of the country, and that was hard for me. Right? I mean, I'm not a purist at all or an ideologue, but it was really hard to hear him deliver a message in one part of the country and a different message in another country, particularly having to do with something like healthcare or Medicaid or food stamps. It was hard. It was hard. And
Right.
then and the administration was like that too. You probably remember that Donna Shalala, who was the head of Health and Human Services, quit because of a bill of him promoting welfare to work. It was welfare to work. It was a very
Right.
stringent kind of thing, which is still in existence, I'm pretty sure. At least it
Right.
was before this president. I don't know what's happening now, right? Yeah.
Right. And Edelman retired, quit as well on the welfare law. He was
Yes,
the husband of the founder of the Children's Defense League, very
that's
close to the
right.
Clinton.
Marion Edelman's, yeah, husband, yeah.
I
Wife.
forget his name
Yeah,
now,
I forget his name, yeah. There were a
but
lot of
yeah,
people, yeah, that, yeah,
as successful as that administration was, and they accomplished a lot, a balanced budget. No one else has done that
right,
in the last
right,
50 years. There's just a sense that there was so much potential was so great that so much was lost because he
yeah,
couldn't control himself.
yeah. There is
And
that, though, his Clinton Global Initiative after the fact, I guess, is pretty successful. I can't tell that because it's mostly foreign aid. And
right,
when we had USAID, he was all over the world, particularly Africa as well, delivering medicine and stuff like that. So I don't know what's happened to them now. They weren't doling out USAID dollars, but they were working side by side with them and other NGOs. So I don't know what is going on there now.
My sense is they've scaled back in recent years. Like they were very active during the Obama years, and
Yeah,
just for a variety of reasons. I mean, they're getting older too. I
yeah,
mean, So you did the Clinton administration. You came back and you worked with David Orr for a number of
yeah.
years.
I worked with David Orr until I retired, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we went through all kinds of protests for gay marriage in David Orr's office.
right,
Poor David Orr was for gay marriage, and he
right,
couldn't issue marriage certificates because it was illegal.
right,
Good God, I mean, he wouldn't because it was illegal. I was telling him, you do it anyway, right? It's illegal, right? That kind of thing. So, you know, he's a good guy, and it was good to work for him too. Another person who's, you can really learn a lot from him.
right,
That kind of thing, where I'm coming from a campaign, okay, it's illegal. Kind of, so what? It's not that illegal, right? Do it anyway.
right,
Issue
right.
these marriage certificates, right?
I mean,
Illegal.
that's what Gavin Newsom did in California,
That's what he
right?
did. That's what he
Right,
did. So, and
right,
also we went through that. We went through. We had to that. So after 2000, well, anyway, it was the new election equipment we had to get, that all
right,
had to adhere to these federal laws, which was really the first time that that had ever happened. So that was really kind of daunting, but good, a really great learning experience. So, because now, right, I know a lot about election equipment. Like whenever it
right,
comes up and I start talking about it, I think, well, nobody cares about this, right? A,
right,
nobody cares about it. B, nobody really believes I know what I'm talking about, right? Anyway, but a lot about election equipment and tabulation systems and stuff like that.
right,
So, and how secure election is here in Cook County, Chicago and Cook County, right? And
right.
he really played hardball too because he wanted certain election equipment that he knew was the best one for Cook County in order. And Chicago and Cook County are separate election departments. So what he did was he went and signed a contract, and that meant that forced Chicago into signing the same contract, the same equipment, which they didn't really want to do.
Right. I will say, having worked in politics, there's always the mythology, the Chicago machine steals all these votes, which, in all honesty, did happen prior to the 70s, I would
Yeah,
say. But having worked on a lot of campaigns that did come to a recount, it's real. It sort of restored the faith in the system.
yeah,
People
yeah,
do take it seriously. The machines do work.
yeah.
When Trump tried to stir up all these machines, in 2020, my dad, who was a Trumper, would say, "Oh, look, you see all the." I'm like, "Dad, if you actually sat there and went through it ballot by ballot, you would know
You
how
would see,
hard that is." Right.
absolutely impossible. Oh my gosh, the security that we had to have on those machines, both the internal security and the external. I mean, we built cages, locked cages in a warehouse for those machines.
Right.
Oh my
Right.
gosh, we had so much security for them. So they've changed now. I don't know what they are, but Governor Pritzker, this every message is, Trump is going to try to rig the election. He's going to say that he's going to, confiscate all the machines, right? He's saying that now. Pritzker's saying that now. I appreciate that he's saying it and I understand it too, but I don't see anybody getting ready for that. I hope they are. I hope somebody is. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Having people at the polling place or something. I don't know whatever the strategy is that the seems to me we should that's what we should be working on.
Right. Well, these elections coming up in New Jersey and Virginia are
Yeah,
interesting test cases because, Trump has made it clear the Department of Justice will
yeah,
have their people around,
yeah.
which definitely raises alarm bells. I do want to, I have taken up already more of your time than I had hoped,
Sorry.
but I do want to talk a little bit about your writing. So, in retirement, you have become this prolific writer. How did you
Thank
come to
you, Josh. So what happened was I joined a memoir writing class. But before that happened, I have arthritis, and I also have a condition called fibromyalgia, which is a pain condition that's kind of mysterious. Nobody knows what to do with it. And
Right.
so, I went to a few doctors, and it's no point. I went to a pain clinic at Shirley Ryan, which I highly recommend. That's where I learned to meditate, by the way. Meditation is really help for chronic pain. But anyway, and then I somehow ended up at this doctor because he went to my church, and somebody told me he was a pain doctor. I went over to him, and he cures pain with writing exercises. So this is not new, particularly because there is a whole study, a whole field of study on this. It's called expressive writing, or writing away your pain, or something like that. But it's been around for years, and he does that kind of work. So he had this whole workbook uh, that in I've been used to reflecting on things because of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That's kind of a part of the work that you do there. So, but this, doing it for in this workbook that this one particular doctor had, it really was different. It went deeper. That's all. It went deeper, and
Right.
so then simultaneous, really, I joined a memoir writing class and started writing. And because I was doing this work anyway, my writing was people loved my stories in my class. Not that we didn't love all of our stories, but I
Right.
was deeper. I was going deeper. I was going farther. I was being more authentic or truthful, maybe truth more than anything, because I needed to, because that's what was going to relieve my pain. And it works.
Right.
I should say it really does work. So eventually wrote a memoir. So I put a lot of writing together and tried to massage it so it sounded good, and sent it off to a publisher here in Chicago, Tortoise Books. And right away he contacted me and said, "Can you send me your manuscript?" Of course I didn't have, but I thought it kind of went, that's what it was. But I had no idea what I was doing. So I wrote a lot more, and then he's a hybrid publisher, so and a really good editor, and also he was a history major at Notre Dame, so the historical parts of my writing he could correct or add, that kind of thing. Make sure the dates, he knew the dates were correct.
Right.
So that's how that happened, and then of course it came out during COVID, right? But and then I started a blog, and I used to write for my blog every week, but now I write more infrequently than that, because what's happened now, I don't know if you, anyway, I'm not writing fiction. It would be nice if I could, but I'm now not ever really there. I would love to, but I'm not. And
Right.
so I have a smaller group of friends, right? And I can't write about them.
Right.
So people who write, we all have this problem. We can't write about our
Right.
friends, right? And if I,
Right.
there's sometimes when I do include things about my friends, like my friend Abigail came to the meditation group with me at Broadview. That was fine. But there's some funny things that people say that I can't write about. I just can't.
Right.
And also, it's very difficult for me to write about what's happening with Trump. I don't know about you, but it is so hard because
Right.
I get so emotional about it, and I don't want to be so, right.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Well, let me. I know one other thing you do is mentor other people, and I was working on. So I'll end with this little anecdote. I was managing a campaign back in 2010, and a friend of ours, mutual friend, and all of a sudden, it was getting towards the end. It was like a month out, so we were staffing up. All of a sudden, this woman appeared on the campaign. The candidate said, "Oh, she'll be helping us out from here," and she she was just a little, I don't want to say off, but she couldn't quite get in the flow of things. And I went to the candidate. I'm like, what? What's that? We're trying to get things done. And she said, this is a friend of Regan Burke's. And she is brand new to sobriety. And we're
Oh,
giving her a place. You had reached out to somebody and
yeah.
secured this place. So we were a place to where she could like make some money while she's getting her bearings in the world as a sober person. And she went on to have a long career in the federal government. But I was quite struck that the
That's
ways that
great.
you were taking
Yeah,
care of this woman, and I'm sure
yeah.
many other people.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I am, and I assume you are, believe that anybody who comes into my sphere physically, you know, I, as a citizen, if they're younger or inexperienced, it is my job to help them. It's part of my job as a citizen. And when you're older, it's part of my job with 50-year-olds, right? To
Yeah,
say things like, and which I'm doing all the time. And I know a lot of people don't like this. This is what happens when you get old. Your hearing diminishes, your eyesight diminishes, and your voice diminishes. So when I'm speaking softly, you have to know that's age related. So tell me to speak up because I can, right? That kind of thing. So I now feel very committed to educating people who are younger than I am about what it is to be old because we don't have that. When I retired, I went to this like a 4-hour class at Northwestern on how to be old or something. And I learned a lot of things there that were shocking to me. And
hmm
nobody learns it.
right,
Like your muscles get weaker. So instead of, accepting the fact that your muscles get weaker, people get sent off to physical therapy to strengthen themselves, that kind
right,
of thing. And the way people talk about their parents, right? And what to do with their parents, like somebody called me a few months ago and said, blah, 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 blah. And she said, what do other people do? And I said, other people do exactly what you're doing. Exactly. You just
right,
find out any answer anywhere that's going to suit you and your mother, and you go with it. But you know what I mean? There's no
right,
stopping me from
right.
giving information. And I also know a lot about Medicare, right? I mean, a lot. So whenever the subject comes up, I'm a complete know it all,
All
a
right,
total, complete know it all. And that's not, it's changing. So, and I'm not, there's volunteers that do that. This on the state. They come through the state, but they're advertising them now on TV. Thank God. They're called CHIP volunteers. I'm not one of those. I'm not
right,
in an organized group of people who do that. And the other thing is too, younger people, because now of course I have grandparents come to me. My grandson wants to blah 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 blah. So I would sit with somebody for hours and talk about campaigns with people and where to go and what to do. And I've probably sent some to you over time. I've probably sent people to you
right,
as a campaign manager, but I just think that's my responsibility as a citizen and as a human being, really.
right. Well, Regan, thank you so much for taking this time to talk with me and our listeners today. It's been very informative and enjoyable, and I wish you continued success in your writing. I look forward to hearing more about it. And to our listeners, thank you. And we'll have a new episode up again in the next week or two. Bye now.
Thank you, Josh. Thank